Every 10 years following the census, the legislature is charged with the task of redrawing district boundaries for legislative and congressional seats. The Republican-led Senate and the DFL-led House have each drafted new district maps, which will be reviewed in the coming legislative session. This week, I spoke with the chairs of their respective committees, and we begin with Senator Mark Johnson. A press release from the Senate Republican caucus touted the compactness of the Senate's maps in noting that there are fewer county, city, and township splits than in the House DFL proposal. Why was this important?
Well, thanks for the question, Shannon. It really was something that's important to me and to the Senate Republicans. In respect to individuals who are going to be out and voting, we want to make sure that there's districts that make sense for the representation that they're trying to elect. So compactness is one of the many factors that we look at when we're doing this. We've got constitutional factors, we've got statutory factors. We've got the court has issued some principles. We've used principles in the past for redistricting, and compactness is one of those that just when you look at a map, you know, does it look compact? Does it look like something that makes sense and that people can understand? And that's one of many factors that people need to be looking at, and we need to be looking at when designing these maps. Because if a district, if you've got to be jumping over certain lines, if it's a narrow district, if it's kind of a goofy looking district, it adds so much confusion to the voter on where do I even vote? Who am I voting for? Where are the candidates? Who's representing me? And to simplify that and make it make sense for citizens across the state is one of those important factors that we need to take into account when designing these maps. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why we tout that fact.
There were sort of two schools of thought that I heard referenced in this process of redistricting. One was the idea that you would take the maps that currently exist and just make adjustments according to the population changes. And there was another idea that you would just simply start from scratch and see where that led you following the principles of redistricting that you were just talking about. What was the Senate's approach?
Yeah, so the Senate, we look at the population change. That's where we've got to start from is now that population has changed, we want to make sure that each person has the vote that they're constitutionally allowed to have. And so when you're looking at that map, what makes the most sense for the constituents across the state? And it's you completely take the map and throw it in the garbage and redraw a new one. Is definitely one of the ways that you could go about it. But again, by doing that, think of the confusion that a voter might have or a constituent might have if all of a sudden the districts and everything across the state change. And I think the courts have been interested in the past of maintaining some semblance of a map that's similar. Now, there's significant changes, no matter what map, even when you try to hold to districts that are currently there. There's still the population changes and the relative change across the state doesn't make it possible to really throw the map or to maintain the same map. But you want to give some semblance and through the numbering, through the look of it. So we tried, to not confuse people, to make sure that the maps were consistent with all the principles of the court, the Voting Rights Act, the whole works. There's so many constraints to it that that's really one aspect that we didn't want to just throw the old map out and start new. We wanted something to base it off.
There's one district in particular I'd like to ask you about, because when I glanced at all of the maps, I've looked at all of them, most of the boundaries make sense, in terms of compactness and geography and all of that. But there was one that was a little unusual to me, and it's the proposed Senate District 5, which includes the cities of Breckenridge and Moorhead, and all are parts of 5 counties. The district is long and narrow and almost in the shape of an L. And I'm wondering what prompted that district.
Yeah, what we wanted to do was take Italy and then just flip it the other way. It's a mirror image. So that's it really. So if you look at the map and you look at that, you say, well, that doesn't make much sense. Why are we doing it that way? But when you get in and you start to understand the communities, it does make a lot of sense. So we've got the Red River Valley that goes south there, and then we've got Minnesota River Valley that goes a little bit east on that point as well. Very similar economies around agriculture, sugar beets. There's a lot of wheat production and corn. So it was really a community of interest on how do we put this together. So it's a Senate district that really represents that agricultural heartland right down that river valley. So there was ways of doing that, but we thought, well, this one really makes sense for the representation of the economy, the industry, the landscape, and everything that's involved there. So that's one of those districts that's a little bit longer and narrower. In reality, it doesn't change the politics of that area. That really wasn't a consideration. It doesn't change that so much. So it's just a matter of how do these people elect somebody that represents their interests.
Now, the next job is going to be for the Senate and the House to pass their respective maps and then reach an agreement. But when it comes to the congressional map, it is starkly different. To me, it looks like the Senate's version basically takes what we're used to with some adjustments, whereas the House DFL proposed congressional map has the 8th district all across the northern part, the 7th is the western part, and the 1st district is kind of the southeast corner. In terms of reaching an agreement, is it possible with such starkly different approaches to congressional redistricting?
Yeah. So the right now, currently, I sit in Senate District 7, or I'm sorry, Congressional District 7, and so like you say, the House map really changes that up quite a bit, and we get 8 coming across, which Representative Stauber currently has now, and I don't know exactly what the rationale behind that was. Maybe if Canada invades, we'll be willing to give that up to the Canadians. I'm not sure exactly what that was for, but there is such a difference in northern Minnesota. You kind of look at that as a big block, but if you look at there's mining over in the Hibbing area, Duluth. You've got the forestry over, especially the east side of the state. But as soon as you get about halfway across the state, all of a sudden it becomes agriculture. I mean, that's the predominant industry over here is agriculture, and the interests are starkly different. So for me, the current district right now of CD7 is really an agricultural district that represents the agricultural land. So to me, that makes sense. I've had a conversation now with Representative Murphy on the other side. She's the chair of redistricting for them. And we had a really great conversation, just the two of us. I think we'd be able to probably have this debate. I know it's been a debate that's went on in years past as well. So it would be interesting to sit down and talk to her and see what the actual functioning of that is. Maybe we could figure out something that would be a good compromise there. But yeah, I mean, our maps are different, but that's the basis of negotiation. And you got that opportunity to do that.
As you know, if the legislature does not come to an agreement on these maps, the courts will then make the decision. The deadline is February 15th. And there are multiple, I think as many as 5 other maps that have been submitted, including one that was put together by some data scientists using the latest mapping technology. And part of it was an effort to remove human bias. So this is a 2-part question. First, what do you think about the idea of mapping and being able to remove human bias? And second, did you use technology to help you make the Senate maps?
Sure. So number one, I laugh a little bit when you say taking the bias out of map making through technology, because who designs that technology? It's humans that are doing that, and built into the systems are that bias, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, it's there. So although they claim that it's an unbiased, data-driven map, I'm not 100% convinced, and I think the court had the same skepticism too. As you can see, they very much limited the testimony that they were able to bring in, or the amicus brief that they were able to bring in on that as well. So that being said, they have every right to create a map and bring that forward and put that into the pile and say, hey, here's an idea of what an unbiased map looks like. And so we're very much willing to take that on. But as far as technology in general, think about back in the day when they started doing maps on a regular basis. I mean, it was several people in a room with a pen and they're drawing out districts, and it's a very labor intensive map. And so you can maybe only get out a couple of maps that are proposals for maps. Nowadays, with the technology that we have, and especially this election cycle, even 2010, we had capability, but now this redistricting cycle, you can come up with infinite number of maps based on the variables that are given. And so, for both us and the courts who are reviewing maps and doing things, I mean, it is so overwhelming. But yes, we do use technology, but we also have to, input a lot of the variables that make up the map making process. So it's a combination of the two, technology and people.
Senator Mark Johnson, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and we will be watching excitedly how things unfold. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.